Good morning, YouTube. My name is Arthur, and welcome to the Ducks on the Round Table Yu-Gi-Oh podcast, a weekly podcast where we discuss philosophies, strategies, or whatever we want to based around the fields of Yu-Gi-Oh and life. A little bit of a disclaimer, this is filmed exactly, or rather recorded, exactly after I did the first one, so I haven't really analyzed my speech patterns and the video quality and whatnot, and you still have the same wonderfully designed, drawn picture by yours truly. As the cover photo. As the weeks go, I'm going to try and work on my own delivery and editing and stuff like that. The thing is that whenever you can be perfectly good around speaking in front of people, but whenever it comes to a microphone in front of your face and then a picture in front of you, just looking at a wall, you lose all sense of this is what I should not say I should not say K. Anywho, this second week we're going to be discussing the 8 chapters of a Duelist. Now, this is something I created way back in the day. I used to work the midnight to 8 shift as a campus security guard, and I made this list, and I keep on going back to it, and I'm like, wow, this is actually somewhat true. And I haven't looked at it in about a year or so, so this will be the first time me going back to it. I just made sure I had it in my phone, but we're going to be covering it's in depth. And over the next 30 minutes or so, maybe less, we're going to discuss it. And let me know down below if you agree with it or if you have any different things that you would change in it. Obviously, this was made in a different mindset, in a different stage of my life as a duelist. But we'll see. Anyway, let's crack right into it. The Chapter 1. This chapter is before you duel the first time and you think you are ready to send people to the Shadow Realm. This is something that people often get into the mindset of, because most of the time when people get into Yu-Gi-Oh, it's because of the anime. Be honest, majority of people out there got into Yu-Gi-Oh because of the anime. Now, I know this isn't everyone, but it's still the exception for most people. You pick up your first starter deck exactly as the protagonist that you love has. You know all the cards. You've read the rule book. You're like, oh, yeah, I've got this. Okay, this is chapter 1 in your life. You are excited. You are ready to duel. Okay, little do you realize that you probably kind of suck. And it stinks too, because everyone has to go through this stage. And that's the same with anything in life. You have to get to a stage where you're excited to do something, and you have to take that first step. And everyone sucks at something the first time they try it. Some people suck a little bit more. Some people a little bit less. Some people are just naturals. But in all reality, everyone has to go through this chapter. You're going to find a commonality. Like I said, I haven't read all this, but I've skimmed through it. You're going to find something where this didn't really apply to me. Okay, you can skip over chapters. That's the way this is going to be. You're going to be able to skip through these chapters in this book, and you might have an ending that happens before you get to chapter 8. But we're just going to go through these anyway. Then you get to chapter 2. After you've completely gone through chapter 1, you're like, oh, yeah, I've gone through it. You duel the first time, and you realize you suck. Okay, there's nothing that hurts more than loss. Learning how to deal with loss is something really, really difficult, and everyone has to go through this chapter of loss and losing. And we'll go through an entirely different podcast when it comes to how to cope with loss, but everyone has to go through this chapter, because in all actuality, the first time you duel against a person, it's more than likely going to be against a person who's just going to show you no mercy. Unless you're doing it with a friend who understands how to approach new duelists, they're going to absolutely slaughter you, because, realistically, oh, I can win. I have a superior deck, or they don't know what they're doing. I can just make up this rule. And everyone has to go through it. And it kind of stinks. It stinks, this chapter. Loss is never good. Okay, but that's until you get to chapter 3. Kind of plowing through these first few. But in all actuality, it can be, depending on how much you go through and how much you study, you can plow through these chapters pretty quickly. Chapter 3, you get better, beat some friends still in stage 3 or lower. or chapter 3. I named these as stages, but I'm redefining them as chapters here. Okay, this is what happened to me personally, and I think it happens to most people. Okay, you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm understanding this is how fluid, this is how to build a deck. This is how to actually play this game, right? I've gone through all the steps. I've made my deck better. I've learned a little bit more about the game, and then if you're in a good environment, you're going to be around people around the same thing, right? That's how me and my college friends, the people who built this channel, kind of were. This is how we progressed. We all had our Yu-Gi-Oh cards from way back in the day. We all had a very basic understanding. We had lost before, and we understood the very basic mechanics of the game, right? And then we got together and we dueled, and we all got better. Not both, there were a lot of us. We all got better and progressed to this chapter, I feel. Okay? Then all of us got together and we're like, we're going to go to a regional. We skipped over locals. We had made plenty of our own locals plenty of times. We thought we were ready. We went to a regional. And that is when you get to chapter 4. Okay? This might be a locals for some of you, but it might be a regionals for some people. And a lot of people actually get thrust into chapter 4 way too early on in their dueling careers. I know a lot of people that here are your cards, here's a basic understanding. They've gone through stage chapter 1 and 2, and like, here, we're going to go straight to chapter 4, right? Okay, but if you go through the right process, you're going to go through the first 3 chapters, and you're going to have the basic understanding where you have beat people from chapters 1 through 3, or stages. Then you go to chapter 4, where you go to your first sanctioned event, and you realize you suck again. This is nothing to be ashamed of, but realistically, at a local, or more specifically in our case, a regional, those people are there to win, right? They're there to compete. They're there to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In all actuality, when you have 200 people in a room, 200 plus, or whatever you have, you're going to have a bunch of people who know what they're doing. Even though some of us had been playing and had the cards longer, these people have been playing against people at their same caliber for much, much longer, right? And realistically, we have 4 more chapters to go through, so there's got to be people that better than the chapter 4. Now, the thing is, what do you do when you get to chapter 4, right? You could. This is where a lot of people. This is where they end. A lot of people. I'm gonna be completely honest. I'm gonna throw this multiple times. You're gonna have the ending. Okay, or you call it the chapter 9 or whatever. Okay, some people will quit. It's like when you're reading a book. Okay, that's why I'm going with this analogy. Is we're going with a book. Whenever you're reading a book, a lot of times you'll start with the first few chapters or even the beginning. Some people will first read the first chapter and I'm done with this. They'll close it, put it on a bookshelf, return it to the library, if you are a book reader, and then they'll never go back to it. And that is their ending. They'll end with the intro. Some people will make it about partway through the book and realize, I'm wasting my time. This book isn't giving me anything that I want, be it fiction or nonfiction. And then they'll put it on the shelf. So the ending can come at whatever time, right? And in this fictional imaginary book that we've created for ourselves, you can jump around, right? And it doesn't have a clear-cut ending. I mean, not to be morbid or anything, but the ending might just be when you die. Okay, or when the game dies. It's whatever. That's a topic for another day. Not to go morbid, but anyways. So you get through chapter 4, which again was when you go to a sanctioned event and you realize you suck again. Now keep in mind when I was doing this, I had been awake for about 50 hours, so I was a little bit tired. But there still is some validity, and a lot of times some of the best ideas come when you're in a state of tiredness because you don't have that sense of doubt. Anywho. Then we go on to chapter 5. Okay, that's after you sucked, you realize you sucked. Okay, you've actually gone through and reflected, and that is when you aspire to get better and do so, shocking the world. All right, let me repeat that again. Chapter 5. When you aspire to get better and do so, shocking the world. These are the people who take that loss and they get better. Oftentimes you'll go to your locals, you go to your regionals, and you'll see that person that you absolutely slaughtered or knew that they were terrible and spent a lot of times on these lower tables. Right? And she's like, oh, this will be a very easy win. So you go in there half-heartedly, and they come by, and they end up slaughtering you. Right? This is... it happens. It happens quite often. And that's the shock in the world part, okay? This is what you do with that loss. You take the chances, you take that experience, and you get better. Right? Realistically, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has more probable outcomes than chess. It's weird to think about. Chess has millions of probabilities, right? Chess grandmasters go through so many experiences in their lives, but they can never do every single probable outcome of a chess match. That's just the way it is, right? And Yu-Gi-Oh! Adds more to that because there are thousands of more pieces. You know, that might be not the best analogy because chess is definitely a different game, but that's the basic outline there. So you go through chapter 5, you know, you've gotten better, you're getting better. That is a continuous process, right? You should always strive to get better. At some point, you realize you go through chapter 5 and you're at chapter 6. Okay, we're really plowing through this book. Chapter 6 is when you know what you need to know about the game. You break the code, yet somehow are worse than players on stage 3 and 4. Let me repeat that again. When you know what you need to know about the game, break the code, yet you are somehow worse than players on stage 3 and 4. Now, let me break this down, okay? Because, again, I was in a very tired state when I got to this. You get to a point in the game where you understand the rulings. You understand, you know, the difference between a colon and a semicolon. You know, hard once per turns versus loose once per turns. You've seen these cards before. You may not know what they do, but you've seen all these cards before, right? You've gotten to that point. You're like, okay, this is how I fluidly go through my deck. I can play all my cards just fine. But for some reason, you end up sucking so bad. And this is where this is, for those of you who don't know, this is where I pigeonhole myself a lot of times, is at this chapter 6. So the chapters 7 and 8, you know, are kind of not based off of personal opinion or experiences, but as opinions and observations. You know, I feel like I have a decent understanding of the game, but there are constantly times where, like, wow, I did not know that. And people who are newer to the game, people who are far younger than I am, can just do some certain things that blow my mind. Absolutely. And it sucks. You know, if you notice, there's kind of a back and forth in these chapters. You know, the ups and downs. Okay, rather than going through the, you know, the hero's journey. If you've ever done studying into stories, you know, going through, you go to the rising climax, you hit the plateau, falling action, and then you have resolution. You know, that's a different thing. There's a lot of ups and downs. Right, and this is a point where you are down. You absolutely feel terrible, right? Because people who should not be doing better than you are absolutely slaughtering you. And oftentimes, unfortunately, this is where I've seen people quit. Be it because it takes so long to get to this point that you've outgrown the game, or it gets to a point where you're just so frustrated, you know? It's not one, like, you can invest a little bit into this game and succeed, but to be honest, you have to constantly invest stuff. That's not just money, but financially. You know, you have to. It's not cheap when it comes to mentality, right? You're putting your mind into here. You're putting your time. You're going to lose. That is a guarantee. You're going to lose. And what you do after that, that's completely up to you. And I'm not saying that people who quit, you know, after this stage or any point in time before, you know, suck at life and they don't deserve to call themselves a duelist. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that this often happens, right? You repurpose yourself to a different point in life. Okay? And you stay at the stage and you get tired of losing, right? You want to win again. You know everything you do about the game, but you keep on losing. So oftentimes, this is again purely from observation. I'm not trying to call out anyone on this. You go to chapter 7, where you get better again, but you lose your humanity and look down at the lower life forms. Okay, this is the mindset of a person who was awake for far too long at 4 a.m. And what this means is you don't put forth the enjoyment into the game, right? The only way that you build your decks are by looking at profiles, which, again, there's nothing wrong with that. I post profiles, so I'm not against that. But those are supposed to be guidelines, starting points. You yourself are supposed to make modifications, right? And there are so many people out there, they're like, the only reason I play this deck is because it wins. That is a mentality, and winning is definitely part of the game. No one wants to lose. Absolutely nobody wants to lose. But there are some people who take this to such an extreme level that they don't really care. I've been through so many events where people will just play through their hands, not interact, right? I'm a person, I like to talk to people and interact, because it's an interactive game. Oh my gosh. And just some opponents just aren't there. They're just to go through their solitaire hands, which, again, nothing wrong with that, but don't communicate. They just, play through everything, and if they lose, they're like, oh, I bricked. That kind of stinks. But in the same sense, it's a necessary thing if your goal is to win. If you want to get better at the game, you have to kind of go through these stages. And that's not to say that some people haven't jumped through and around all these chapters, gone back and forth and reread and, read ahead. But I feel that this is definitely one necessary thing that people do go through. Okay, and that is, it stinks. I know, and I'm not trying to belittle somebody, but take yourself into perspective and see if you're a person who's on this stage 7. Because I feel you can get past this point. You can get past stage 7 and chapter 7, as I call it, and move on to chapter 8. And what I put here was, when you are good, people know you are good, but you actually have a soul again. Few people achieve this. I put in quotation marks. Let me repeat that again. When you are good, people know you are good, but you actually have a soul again. Few people actually achieve this. These are the people who have gone through everything. They understand, dang, I'm good. They've played all the meta decks. They've done all the research. They've gone through the work it takes to achieve this success. Now, I've made this analogy before, but there are often times where I'll go to an event and I'll see people who say, I lost to this deck. Whatever the popular deck is at the time, you're like, oh, dang it, I lost there. But then there are also people who say, I lost to so-and-so. That their name becomes so synonymous with the game, be it at a local or a regional or a national level, that they don't care about what deck they're playing. They're playing against the Duelist. And honestly, I think that should be a stage that most people achieve. Now, I've oftentimes seen people who still play these, top tier 1 decks, but they take it and they put their own flavor to it. Not that this is bad or a good thing. There's something to be said about deck building and staying with the formula, but they're not afraid to take the chances. And these chances that they've taken have pushed their deck to a completely new level. It's what makes the innovation in gameplay, right? These decks just don't pop up out of nowhere. Someone has to come up with them. Realistically, right? Whenever you're doing these net decks, whose deck are you net decking? And these are also the people who go through I want to play this archetype because I really like it. But they have the knowledge to back up this complete understanding of the deck, so they can actually make it do things that it wasn't initially capable of. And that's often what people get into the downside of when they're thoroughly just focused on winning. And they're like, this deck will not win because it has not won. But these people at Chapter 8 or Stage 8, they look at the deck and what can I do to make this better? Right? Does this deck have a purpose right now? Can I actually succeed with this deck? and they take it and they do succeed with it. And, statistically, that's not the best chance because you also have other people who will take that same deck and not succeed with it. That doesn't necessarily mean they're any less competent. It might be a victim of circumstance, but that's just the reality of the situation. And when I say it's said few people actually achieve this, I haven't really seen this too many times in the game. It really stinks. Oftentimes you see at these top tables, the best players, they're the ones who constantly are just used to winning, and it's absolutely quiet, partially because they're so intense into the gameplay, but partially because they're just going through the motions. They're worried more about the outcome rather than the journey, and it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad, and I hate to dwell so much on this chapter 7 to make it seem negative, because it's not. It should be something that's positive because it's a person's development and growth. And there might be more chapters out there. I might have been missing some. There might be some intertwined in there before you reach the end. And who says you have to reach an end? Oftentimes, let's go back, take it back a little bit to some of you might still be in school and you have a textbook, right? Textbooks don't really end per se. They just finish, right? Like there's not really a point. Oh, you have completely mastered this craft. There's just things that you can go back and relearn. And I feel that's necessary. Like whenever you go through any card game, these stages are something you probably have to achieve. Now, let's take this to another perspective. Let's take this to a lives perspective, right? Chapter 1, before you duel and you're ready to send people to the Shadow Realm, right? This is when you are like, awesome. Let's take it into like, you're going to start a career. Okay, you're going to be a car dealer, or not car dealer, a car mechanic, right? You're like, boom, I've spent my whole entire life around cars, I should know everything. But then you go to tech school, or you're going to an automotive place, and they ask you, what about the blinker fluid? I'm like, what? Not saying that people actually fall for that, but they're like, you realize, crap, I don't really know anything, right? That's going through chapters 1 and 2. And you get to chapter 3, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm understanding. There's no such thing as blinker fluid, right? This is where these nuts are. These are, this is where the alternator is. This is the components of an AC unit, And then you go to other, like, let's say you move, right? You get to chapter 4, you go to another place, and you realize you're not that good, right? There's something completely different between working on a car and working on a truck. There's the basics are the same, but they're particularly as they release new stuff, you're gonna realize your pitfalls. Okay, this is just an analogy, and bear with me. You can input your own thing into it, and you get to chapter 5 where you aspire to get better, and you do so. Right, you learn, you continually try and progress yourself so that you can get better in your craft. Okay, and then you're gonna get to the burnout point. That's chapter 6. You're gonna realize, crap, these younger people that have spent more time around this or spent this specific vehicle, they know more than I do, right? And so you have to work harder, but you're still, doesn't matter how much you work, you're still going to be worse than somebody off. And then you get to stage 7 where you get into that routine and you are that seasoned individual, but you don't really, you're just kind of going through emotions. You've lost your enjoyment that you had from that chapter 1. But then you get to chapter 8 and you realize you love your craft. You love working on cars. You're excited to share things about people, and people are excited to bring vehicles to you, right? You may not be the absolute best out there, but people know you know what you're talking about. And that's just the kind of real-world applications right there. So let me go through these one at a time. I'm just going to read them off to you, okay? Chapters 1 through 8, okay? And again, the ending can be anywhere from the beginning, from chapter 1 through chapter 8, anywhere in the middle, or it may not happen. Right? I've been playing the game for far too long. I'm not even going to go into that detail. Anyway, chapter 1. Before you duel for the first time, and you think you are ready to send people to the Shadow Realm. Chapter 2. When you duel the first few times, and you realize you suck. Chapter 3. When you get better and beat some friends in chapter 3 or earlier. Chapter 4. When you go to a sanctioned event, and you realize you suck again. Chapter 5, where you aspire to get better, and do so shocking the world. Chapter 6. When you know what you need to know about the game, you break the code, yet you somehow are worse than people on chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 7. When you get better again, but lose your humanity and look down on the lower life forms. Chapter 8. When you are good, people know you are good, but you actually have a soul again. Few people actually achieve this. Again, these are just the mindset of a delusional person working in the night shift at 4 o'clock in the morning. You can take these with a grain of salt, or you can take these and learn from them, right? You should learn something from every experience. And I hope you do. I hope you do get something from all this. And I would love to learn from you. So if you feel that one of these is wrong, okay, or that you want to input your own, or anything, put down in the comment section. What do you think should change? Because it's just one man's opinion. I'm talking to a wall right now. It's weird to think about that, right? I'm talking to a wall. And I hope this gives you some enlightenment as to, what if you're struggling through something right now, just realize that it will get better, right? And additionally, if you're a person who would like to discuss something like this, right? It doesn't have to be a list like the first episode or chapters like the second episode. If there's anything you want to discuss, I'd be completely open to it. Because these might just end up being just 1 or 10 people listening to them, and it might be a time capsule. But if you are a person who's really passionate about something, there's nothing more exciting than going back to that time capsule 4 or 5 years from now and saying, wow, I really thought that, be it a plus or a minus. And so if you have something you're passionate about, let me know. I'm trying to work on some way of recording outside voices, which still won't be face-to-face, but to have the ability to record audio so we can actually have interaction. Or if you want to meet in person, if you're a person who knows where I live, I'd be completely down for that as well. So either way, I thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.